I'm so glad that you're back to join me for my next episode. And if you're new, I'm Chef Jennifer Basil and we're doing Italian food. Our last episode, I ate so much pasta that I was too fat to move, so we're still in central Italy. We're gonna talk about fall food though today. We're gonna do Thanksgiving in Italy, which they don't actually celebrate Thanksgiving like we do here in America, but they do harvest festivals. There are several festivals that they do: wine, mushroom, olives, pumpkin, truffles. So today we're gonna do a mushroom dish, mushroom timballo, and we're going to do my version of tiramisu, a pumpkin tiramisu. Let's make some Italian macaroni and cheese. Well, kind of, sort of. We're gonna make our mushroom timballo, which is a molded macaroni and cheese, and we're gonna make this with mushrooms, porcini mushrooms to be exact. So we're gonna start by making a bechamel, and we'll add our cheese to make a lovely cheese sauce. Add our pasta. We're using a small pasta trophy today. This has already been cooked off, and we've already rehydrated our porcini mushrooms. To rehydrate the mushrooms, you actually want to let them soak. It's easier to find dry than fresh. You let them soak in some warm water and milk for about 20 minutes, and once they're rehydrated, you can cook them like you would a fresh mushroom. So let's get started making the bechamel. Okay, so for the bechamel, we're gonna put in 4 tablespoons of butter and equal amounts of flour once that butter is melted. So I've got this on high just so that butter melts fairly quickly. And bechamel is a simple, one of the basic sauces. You want to make sure that you always do equal parts of butter and flour. That way it'll thicken your sauce really well. We're gonna make a cheese sauce with fontina. It's a nice melty Italian cheese. And we'll put that flour in. This is the same way you actually would make a roux. The difference between a bechamel and a roux is we're not gonna cook this flour and butter mixture till it turns brown. We just want it to come together as a paste so that it thickens our milk mixture. Get that whisked up. This would be a great dish to try at Thanksgiving if you want to bring some Italian influence into an American Thanksgiving meal. This is a great one. Okay, we've got a nice paste. And then we're gonna slowly pour in milk. So we have a nice thickened base for our cheese. And you can see it thickens up really quickly. I'm gonna turn that heat down just a little bit. And we'll add in more milk. Now, depending on how salty your cheese is, you may want to add some salt to this mixture just to give it some flavor. Fontina is not as salty as a pecorino or a parmigiano, so I am going to add a little bit of salt once I mix in the cheese. The higher the heat, the quicker it'll thicken, but milk does have a tendency to scald, so just watch your temperature. And now I'm going to pour in fontina. So for this recipe, just like any other mac and cheese recipe, you want to use a cheese that melts well. Oh, look at that. I just want to eat it with a spoon. Nice cheese mixture. And once that cheese is melted, we'll take it off the heat and we will start to season and saute our mushrooms. Okay, that's ready. Let's turn it off the heat, move it to the back. Let's get ready for our mushrooms. Okay, we're back. I've got butter now, so we can start to saute our mushrooms. So let's just put a couple tablespoons in the bottom of the saute pan. Get that melted. We're gonna use porcini mushrooms. If you can't find porcini mushrooms, you can certainly substitute another type of mushroom, but these are what's used in Italy, and there's actually a harvest festival for mushrooms in the fall. So similar to our Thanksgiving, they do harvest festivals, and mushrooms is one of those crops that they do a festival for. So for this, we want our mushrooms. And you know me, I always put my garlic in after something else is already in the pan because I don't want it to burn and get bitter. So we've got mushrooms. We're gonna put some onion. We're gonna throw in that garlic. We're gonna let those onions sweat till they're translucent. And then for seasoning, we're gonna add fresh thyme and some fennel seeds. You can use fresh fennel if you want to use fresh fennel instead of the fennel seeds, which will give it the same flavor. You can actually chop that, dice it like you would the onion at the same size so that it'll cook evenly. Smells so good. All right, we'll take our mushroom mixture, our cheese mixture, over to the pasta, and we'll get all that set to go in the oven. We are ready to put our timballo together. So we've got our cheese sauce. Oh my gosh, so good. If you like cheese, this is gonna be a good dish for you. Okay, so cheese sauce. In goes the mushrooms, all those lovely herbs. Not using basil in this one, although it probably would taste pretty good. And then we will add in our pasta. And I've got quite a bit. I made a whole package, but let's put in enough so that we've got not a loose mixture. We want it kind of tight because this dish doesn't get served in a bowl where you scoop it out. We're actually gonna flip this over like a mold. So we wanna make sure that it's not too soupy. This is trophy pasta. If you watched my previous episode, you learned how to make pasta. This one's super easy because you would take that fresh pasta and just roll it in your fingertips and create this little design. I add a little bit more. I think I'm gonna need to loosen my belt with all this pasta. Okay, now before we pour that mixture into the mold, we are going to coat our pan with some butter. You could use oil, but butter tastes better. I'm gonna do this over the sink just so we don't get butter all over the counter. And you wanna make sure that the sides are coated. Similar to doing a cake pan, you wanna make sure it's coated well. And I'm gonna help it along with my fingers. Okay. Then we're gonna pour in breadcrumbs, just like a cake pan, and we're gonna coat the bottom and sides. And now our pasta mixture can go in. And you can use whatever shape baking dish that you want. If you want round, if you want octagon, hexagon. Just sprinkle the remaining breadcrumbs on top. And then this is gonna go in the oven for about 30 minutes. While this is in the oven baking, we're gonna start our second recipe, which is my Thanksgiving version of tiramisu. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday, and I love to cook Thanksgiving dinner. I started doing dinner parties for all my friends. Before I became a chef, I started with like 8 people, and then it grew to like 12 people, then it grew to like 21. I think my biggest Thanksgiving dinner I did was for 40 people. So I decided to take my favorite Italian dessert, tiramisu, and make my own creation. So we're gonna make a pumpkin tiramisu, which is my take on the classic dessert. We're gonna start by layering. Instead of ladyfingers, we're gonna do graham crackers and ginger snaps. Now, graham crackers will get pretty soggy if you try to dip it in coffee. So what we're gonna do is I've got some frangelico and a little tiramisu liqueur. We're gonna mix that in the coffee. Not a strong espresso for this recipe. I did a hazelnut coffee. And because these will get soggy quickly, instead of dipping them, I'm gonna layer them in my pan. And I'm gonna take the spoon and drizzle the coffee over them until they're nice and coated. You don't want to over soak them because you don't want this to get mushy. This has to set in the refrigerator. And we don't want it to fall apart because it's too wet. And then we'll take our ginger snaps, which are a little bit drier and thicker cookie, and those can get dipped. I might have to eat one, just saying. Good. You dip those in a layer, and we're gonna let this sit soaked for a little bit so they soften up while we make our filling. So you can kind of already see that graham cracker getting soft. That's why I don't dip them. They'd fall apart before you get them in the pan. All right, so let's let this sit for a minute while we make our filling. So for our next step in making the tiramisu, we are going to make the next layer, which is a custard layer. We are gonna mix our egg yolks and sugar together first. And I like to whisk those together. This is a lot of sugar, but I like to do this before we put it over a double boiler. And my water on the double boiler is just simmering. We don't need it to a full boil because what happens? It cooks the eggs. So, I also have more of that frangelico tiramisu liqueur. Let's add that in. Have a nice liquid to start with. Not so pasty, kind of like me when I don't have a tan. I actually do have a tan right now. Which is good, because otherwise you might see right through me. All right, we're gonna do this until it thickens. I promise you by the end of this season, I'm gonna have like buff arms. So we want this to thicken, and it actually will double in size as well. And a little hack, if you don't wanna use a whisk and do this by hand, you could take an electric beater, like a hand mixer, and use that. And it will save your arm muscles, and it'll go much quicker. So we have a nice custard. Kind of has a ribbon-like texture. You can see when I do that. And we're gonna take this over and we're gonna fold in our other ingredients, and we're gonna layer our tiramisu. So now that we have the eggs done, we're going to add in mascarpone, whipped cream. I make my whipped cream with some powdered sugar, and you can use vanilla. In this case, I wanted to flavor it with frangelico. And then we're gonna add in some pumpkin puree to give it that pumpkin-y flavor. So pumpkin spice, move on over. So let's add in the mascarpone first. And we'll fold that in. And because the eggs were warm, it's kind of softening the mascarpone. We don't want it lumpy. But when we put this in the refrigerator overnight to set, that mascarpone will help it solidify. If you can't find mascarpone, you can use cream cheese, although it won't have the same flavor. It'll be a little bit different. And we're gonna add our pumpkin puree. And again, you want to gently fold this in because if you stir it, you're gonna deflate the creaminess of the eggs and you'll lose that custard-like texture. A pretty orange color for the fall. And then finally, we'll mix in our flavored whipped cream. Same thing, fold it so we don't lose the fluffiness of the whipped cream. It does take a little bit of patience to do this, but it's not a difficult recipe and it tastes so good. Okay, and then once that's all combined, we're going to layer it in our pan. Thin layer. And now we're gonna put another cookie layer on top, just like we did before. Coffee again. Just enough to soak it. Ginger snaps. We'll put another layer on top and then we'll put it in the refrigerator overnight to set. It does need to set, so give it at least a couple hours if you can't do it overnight, because you don't want it to fall apart when you plate it. Okay, this is gonna go in the refrigerator overnight to set, and when it comes out, we're gonna sprinkle it with some graham cracker and brown sugar dust. Oh, I almost forgot we have our timballo in here. So let me get that out of the oven before it burns. Woo, doesn't that look good? Okay, so to be on the safe side, I am actually going to loosen the sides a little bit with my knife. And we're going to actually flip this over and we're gonna pray that it comes out like a mold. So take baking sheet. I actually have a pretty plate. Pop that on top. Here we go. Flip it over. Here we go, let's see what happens. Woo! It came out perfect, look at that. Mushroom timballo, which is Italian mac and cheese. So today we did two great recipes for Thanksgiving. We did our mushroom timballo and we did pumpkin tiramisu. This, oh my gosh, look at that. Came out beautifully with the porcini mushrooms, that nice crust. To finish the tiramisu, we'll just sprinkle a little brown sugar and graham cracker crust on it. And you can find these recipes and my other recipes on jenniferbasil.com.